The year 1939 changed everything. When the world plunged into the most devastating conflict in human history, nations scrambled to develop weapons that would give them the edge they desperately needed. What emerged from the laboratories, factories, and testing grounds of World War II were instruments of destruction so advanced and terrifying that they redefined warfare forever. Some of these weapons killed thousands in seconds. Others terrorized entire populations, and a few were so devastating that they literally ended the war. Let's start with number 10, and trust me, even the least deadly weapon on this list was absolutely terrifying to face in combat. The German MG-42 machine gun, nicknamed Hitler's buzzsaw, for reasons that become clear the moment you hear it fire. This weapon could unleash 1,200 rounds per minute, which meant that in the time it takes you to blink, 3 bullets had already left the barrel. Allied soldiers described the sound as fabric being ripped apart, but magnified to an ear-splitting roar that could be heard across entire battlefields. What made the MG-42 so deadly wasn't just its incredible rate of fire. It was the psychological warfare it created. Infantry units would freeze when they heard that distinctive sound, knowing that advancing meant walking into a wall of lead. The weapon was so effective that American forces actually tried to copy its design, but they couldn't match the precision German engineering that made it possible. Moving up to number 9, we encounter the Soviet Katyusha rocket launcher. Those Soviet troops had a different name for it. They called it Stalin's organ because of the haunting wail the rockets made as they streaked through the sky. Unlike conventional artillery that fired 1 shell at a time, the Katyusha could unleash 16 rockets in just 20 seconds, saturating entire areas with explosive death. The terror factor here was unlike anything seen before. When they did impact, they created a hellscape of destruction across hundreds of yards. German soldiers reported that the sound alone was enough to break men's nerves before the rockets even hit. The psychological effect was so powerful that German commanders specifically ordered their troops to take cover not just from the explosions, but from the sound itself, as it was causing panic in the ranks. At number 8, we have the German Panzerfaust, a weapon so simple that teenagers could use it effectively, yet so deadly that it could stop the most advanced tanks of its time. This single-shot anti-tank weapon was essentially a shaped charge on a stick, but what it lacked in sophistication, it made up for in raw destructive power. The Panzerfaust could penetrate 8 inches of armor, which meant that even the mighty Soviet T-34 tanks weren't safe. But here's what made it truly terrifying for tank crews. It was cheap, easy to produce, and could be used by virtually anyone. By 1945, German forces had produced over 6 million of these weapons. Tank crews lived in constant fear because they knew that hidden inside any building, any alley, anybody with a Panzerfaust could end their lives in an instant. Number 7 brings us to the American P-51 Mustang fighter. And while it might seem strange to rank an entire aircraft as a weapon, the P-51 fundamentally changed air warfare. This wasn't just a plane, it was a flying death machine that could escort bombers all the way to their targets and back, something that had been impossible before. The Mustang's deadly efficiency came from its incredible range combined with its superior performance. German pilots, who had dominated European skies for years, suddenly found themselves outclassed by a fighter that could travel over 1,600 miles and still have enough fuel to engage in combat. The psychological impact on the Luftwaffe was devastating. They went from being hunters to being hunted, and they knew it. Coming in at number 6 is the German WWII flying bomb, the world's first cruise missile, and a weapon that brought the terror of war directly to civilian populations like never before. The V1 was terrifying not because of its accuracy, but because of its complete randomness. Londoners learned to fear the moment when the distinctive pulse jet engine suddenly cut out, because that meant the bomb was about to fall somewhere nearby. You couldn't hide from it, you couldn't shoot it down reliably, and you never knew where it would hit next. Over 9,000 of these flying bombs were launched at Britain, killing over 6,000 civilians and wounding 18,000 more. But the real damage was psychological. Entire populations lived in constant terror, never knowing when death would rain from the sky. At number 5, we encounter the Soviet T-34 tank, a weapon that didn't just change tank warfare, it completely revolutionized it. When German forces first encountered the T-34 in 1941, their anti-tank guns simply bounced off its sloped armor. German tank crews reported shooting the T-34 multiple times with no effect, watching in horror as their shells ricocheted harmlessly away. What made the T-34 so deadly was its combination of thick, angled armor, a powerful 76mm gun, and incredible mobility. But beyond its technical specifications, the T-34 represented something more terrifying to German forces. It proved that Soviet engineering had surpassed their own. The Germans had believed their tanks were superior, and suddenly they were facing a weapon they couldn't easily destroy. The T-34 forced Germany to completely redesign their tank strategy, and by then, the Soviets were producing them faster than Germany could destroy them. Number 4 brings us to the German U-boat, specifically the Type 7 submarine that nearly strangled Britain into submission. These underwater predators turned the Atlantic Ocean into a killing field where merchant ships disappeared without warning, taking their crews and precious cargo to the bottom of the sea. The psychological terror of U-boat warfare was unlike anything previously experienced. Sailors knew that death could come from below at any moment, with no warning except the wake of a torpedo speeding toward their ship. The U-boats sank over 3,500 merchant vessels, killing thousands of sailors and nearly cutting off Britain's supply lines completely. What made them so deadly wasn't just their stealth, but their ability to strike fear into every sailor who crossed the Atlantic. Many merchant crews refused to sail certain routes, knowing they were entering what became known as the graveyard of ships. At number 3, we have the German WWII rocket, the world's first ballistic missile, and a weapon so advanced that it was literally decades ahead of its time. Unlike the V1, which you could hear coming, the V2 arrived completely without warning. It traveled faster than the speed of sound, which meant that if you heard it, you had already survived. The V2 represented a new kind of terror. There was no defense against it, no way to shoot it down, and no way to predict where it would strike. Each rocket carried a 1-ton warhead that could level an entire city block. But perhaps most terrifying of all was what the V2 represented for the future. Scientists on both sides realized that this technology could eventually carry much larger warheads across much greater distances. The V2 was the ancestor of every intercontinental ballistic missile that followed. Moving to number 2, we encounter something that changed warfare forever: the German concentration of Zyklon B gas in their extermination camps. While not a battlefield weapon in the traditional sense, its systematic use represents one of the most deadly applications of chemical technology in human history. This wasn't just about killing enemy soldiers. It was about the industrial-scale murder of millions of civilians. The true horror of Zyklon B wasn't just its lethality, but its efficiency. Originally developed as a pesticide, it was repurposed for mass murder on a scale never before imagined. The psychological impact extended far beyond its immediate victims. When Allied forces discovered what had been done with this chemical agent, it fundamentally changed how the world viewed the limits of human cruelty and the potential for science to be turned toward evil. And now we reach number 1, the weapon that didn't just change World War II, it changed the entire world forever: the atomic bomb. Little Boy and Fat Man, 2 weapons that killed over 200,000 people in seconds and brought World War II to an abrupt end. But the numbers don't tell the whole story. What made the atomic bomb the deadliest weapon of the war wasn't just its immediate destruction. It was the fact that it introduced humanity to a new age of warfare where entire cities could be erased with a single weapon. When the Enola Gay dropped Little Boy on Hiroshima, the world changed forever. The explosion created temperatures hotter than the surface of the sun, vaporizing people instantly and leaving only their shadows burned into concrete walls. 3 days later, Fat Man destroyed Nagasaki. Japan surrendered within days, not just because of the death toll, but because they realized they were facing a weapon against which there was no defense. The atomic bomb stands alone at number 1 because it represents the ultimate expression of human destructive capability. Every other weapon on this list, no matter how deadly, could be countered, defended against, or overcome. The atomic bomb changed the fundamental nature of warfare itself. It proved that humans had developed the power to destroy not just armies or cities, but potentially all of civilization. These 10 weapons show us how quickly human ingenuity can turn toward destruction when nations are pushed to their absolute limits. From the MG-42's relentless firepower to the atomic bomb's world-changing power, each weapon tells a story of innovation driven by desperation. World War II didn't just reshape borders and governments, it reshaped our understanding of what weapons could do. And that legacy continues to influence every conflict that followed.